What are the legal issues you see when we talk about LGBTIQA plus rights in Sri Lanka?
Mm, you mean the LGBTIQ community in Sri Lanka is historically a marginalized community, mainly because they are being legally treated as criminals because of the laws housed in the penal code of the country, the laws that we have inherited from the British colonialism. Right? There is no evidence to say that LGBTIQ identities were criminalized during the pre-colonial period. It was the colonial invention to criminalize any sexual conduct that isn't considered as natural, which means the reproductive sex. Right? So this was part of the infiltration of Victorian values into our legal system through colonial rule. And these laws are housed in the Penal Code, Section 365, 365A, and 399, and also some other ordinances such as Vagrants Ordinance. Right? So Section 365 and 365A stands for both unnatural sex and gross indecency. Right? So these are pretty vaguely worded terms that can easily be interpreted and misused by the police, who is the primary authority to implement these laws on the ground, right? And if you look at the historic implementation of these two provisions housed in the Penal Code, it is being targeted towards LGBTIQ individuals. And if you are having a non-conforming behavior, and if you have sex between two men or between two women, and between two trans men, right, or between two trans women, right, any kind of sexual conduct that is not considered as generally accepted morally, the reproductive sex, sex for reproduction, considered as unnatural sex, right? And of course, bestiality is also there, but this is not about bestiality. This is about having a natural phenomenon, sexually attracted to same sex or the same gender, right? And then you have public indecency in the as another crime, where, say, for instance, if you are a LGBTI individual and if you are out at night for a walk or after work, and if the police thinks, oh, you're out for some, sexual conduct or something, they would think this is unnatural and public indecency. They would arrest you and prosecute. And then you have vagrants ordinance, which is often used to, prosecute transgender women and non-binary gay men, non-effeminate men on the streets. And we have also seen recently women were also being prosecuted under vagrants ordinance because they were out at night alone, right? So these are some of the laws, and the other one is the Section 399 of the Penal Code, which is being targeted towards cheating by personation. Often transgender folks are being prosecuted under this because if you are a trans woman and if you haven't changed your documents, one could easily take you under this section because you are presenting your physical feature presents something that is different from what was given to you at birth or in the national identity card, right? So there is this provisions, and if you look at the records historically, these are mainly targeted towards LGBTIQ persons, not straight people, right? And also most of these harassments and prosecutions go unreported, because individuals wouldn't want to come out and challenge these things because of the prevalent stigma in the country against the LGBTIQ people. So the legal challenge that we have for LGBTIQ community is that our penal code and then the colonial laws like Vagrants Ordinance being used to prosecute, oppress, and completely exclude and marginalize LGBTIQ identity. So Sri Lanka is one of the 68 countries in the world that continue to criminalize homosexuality, and also something that is we have inherited from the British colonial legacy.
Right. So we saw India decriminalizing homosexuality. What is the possibility of that happening in Sri Lanka?
Now, this is an interesting case. No, often homosexuality is considered as Western and white elite phenomenon and foreign. India presents a very interesting case because India is our immediate neighbor and considered to be the largest democracy in the world, and uplifting, upholding the values of Asianism and other things. And even India considered this is nothing to be with foreign or anything. This is about our own people, so this has to be accepted, and they should be allowed to be full citizens, right? And it's natural. So this was done in India through the Supreme Court, and there had been cases challenging the country's penal code. So the 367 of the Indian Penal Code, which is exact, same legal provision that we have in 365 and 365A, right? So it's basically the British introduction of law. So they just copied and give it to all the colonies that they had. This is the provision that you can use. So the Supreme Court of India struck down the law saying that homosexuality isn't unnatural; it is natural. So therefore, it isn't a crime under the penal code. So the Indian Supreme Court, with its judicial review powers and exercising their judicial review powers, interpreted the law and created a new law saying that homosexuality is a crime in the country. So they will enjoy full rights as every other citizen. So this was done, and not just overnight, but decade-long process since mid-1990s in the Delhi High Court, and then some retractions, and then again, going forward, right? There had been a number of steps back and forth. So it was a long journey and a process that we had to do. Eventually, decriminalizing. And for many Indian activists, it's not just decriminalizing; it's actually India decolonizing, getting rid of colonial legacy, colonial values embedded in their legal system. So it's decolonizing the legal system. And for the possibilities for Sri Lanka, I think Sri Lankan Supreme Court doesn't have judicial review powers after law is being passed. So this is part of our legal system. So one thing we need to do is that first we need to have individuals challenging the law, right? Then we need to have a judiciary that is empowered to do interpretation and creating laws. So for those conditions, currently we don't have anybody challenging the laws. So if we get someone from the LGBTQ community challenging these laws, then there's an opening. And then in addition to that, this has to be, it will probably be an interpretation of the law. And the Supreme Court has already upheld the judgment given by a magistrate's court prosecuting two gay men for having homosexual conduct, right? So there is an exception in the Supreme Court. On the one hand, this is part of the law. This has to be done by the parliament. But we also understand the morality and civilization values are changing and moving forward. Therefore, these things need to be rectified. The Supreme Court also accepted on the one hand, this is part of the law. On the other hand, this also has to be changed. So, but we can't do anything. This has to be done by the parliament. So the more likely best outcome that we would probably get out from the Supreme Court is to have an interpretation, but not necessarily a law effect, like what happened in the Supreme Court of India. So we have to do this through the parliament. So the legislature is more powerful in Sri Lanka, so the powers are vested with the legislature. So one has to pass an amendment bill to the penal code and then interpret homosexuality in such a way that is not unnatural and a crime.
Okay, so what about the achievements that the community has gained so far in our country, in Sri Lanka?
I think the LGBT movement in Sri Lanka is one of the oldest LGBTIQ movements in South Asia. So mid-1990, which means exactly in 1995, the first LGBTIQ organization, Companions on the Journey, was formed, September 1995. Was one of the largest organizations working on LGBT rights in South Asia. And since then, there have been a number of organizations and groups. Individuals have been working and voicing for this. And the movement has expanded from one organization to currently, I think, more than 10 groups and organizations working on the issues. And not just in Colombo, and groups and organizations in Jaffna and Batikalo. And there are other groups in Gaul and Kandy and working on these issues. So in terms of civil society-wise, there is an expansion and amplification of the voices and the work that they have been doing. And visibilization is part of the agenda as well. So we have gained much more visibility than we were in 1995. Um, and people are coming out and talking in favor of this. But there are a few key achievements that the LGBTIQ movement also gained during this period, specifically during 2016 and 2019, those periods. Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka set up the first subcommittee on sexual and gender minorities, and LGBTIQ community representatives were given a chance to voice their concerns and a space in the system. And then gender recognition certificate was enacted and introduced by the Ministry of Health and the Department of Registered Genders Department, um, as a way to facilitate transgender persons to obtain their legal documentation. So now if you are a transgender person in the country, you can go through a particular accepted medical process, consulting a psychiatrist who will eventually issue a gender recognition certificate, which then you can use to get your um, birth certificate and identity document changed into the gender that you feel about. So if you're a transgender woman, you could change it. You could go to a psychiatrist, consultant, and then get through the process, then get the gender recognition certificate. Go to the Grama Sevaka and necessary authorities, get your birth certificate amended to male to female, and then from that onwards, you can amend all the documents and you can become a woman. And that is another great achievement that we have. A number of activists, specifically the transgender community in Sri Lanka, the Transgender Network, a National Transgender Network, Eco Ground, and Human Rights Commission work tirelessly, and other activists also. So, there are some steps that are taken forward, and even recently for this Pride, for the first time, we have seen politicians coming in favor of, Pride activities. So we ran a campaign for Pride with a Purpose, where politicians such as TNA MP Rasamanikam from Batikalo and NPP's MP Dr. Harini Amarasuriya and former Member of Parliament Bima Ratnayaka of JVP and former Minister Harsha De Silva and current MP in the Parliament from the JB, also among the people who congratulated for Pride. So the tide is slowly changing. But so these are some of the achievements, but then still there remains a major hurdle that we need to get rid of these colonial laws and go back to our own origins of society that actually had a tolerance and much more acceptance and diversity. Yeah.
Okay, going forward, what needs to be done now for things to get better than it is right now?
So the first and foremost thing is that Parliament should amend the law in such a way that it would, enable, equal rights for LGBTIQ citizens as other citizens, right? And first we need to, decriminalize LGBTIQ community, the laws that are being used to prosecute people with diverse sexual and gender identities. And to do that, I think we need to have an effective persuasion process that would convince politicians and the parliamentarians and of course the masses towards embracing diversity and accepting their own people as full citizens. Another major hurdle that I see in this journey is that the language that we speak, the language of persuasion, it's not the language that we speak, the language of persuasion has to have some kind of resonance in the community and with the politicians. I've seen often organizations and NGOs use the language that is being highly technocratic and alien to local politicians and the audiences, which actually creates a gap between the people who lobby for LGBTIQ equality and the people who have the power to make the change. So we need to find a language that local people would understand, terminologies and an approach that we can pursue politicians about these issues. So it's certainly not the language that we can borrow from international lobby, but it's a language that which have been part of our understanding and values. So non-discrimination can be a way forward. So we more or less there is a major consensus among the society, among different segments of society is that because your sexual orientation is different and gender is different, one shall not be discriminated. So this law is basically discriminating because who you are, because who you love, right? Um, so that can be a very great opening and a very prudent and effective pathway to convincing your politicians and public that one shall not be discriminated based on their gender identity and sexual orientation for jobs, for work, and in front of laws, definitely, right? So these things, so it doesn't necessarily speak the language of international lobby, but it speaks the language of people's values, right? And the match has to be, the link has to be done in such a way that people wouldn't feel their values are being threatened. And this is part of their values. So that is the second major hurdle that I think that we need to get rid of and introduce, continue to use a language that common man would understand, and feel this empathetic towards the cause. Yeah. Those are the two major things that needs to be done.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Do you maybe want to talk about your Pride Month?
Okay, so we still have a few minutes left.
Yeah, that's all right. Or were you still answering the last question?
No, that was fine. I'm done with the major questions.
All right. Okay. So,
yeah.
Yes. Why don't you? So, if you can tell us, we can add it to the last bit.
Yes. So, Pride Month is a month-long commemoration of celebrations and activities, done around the world to commemorate the Stonewall riot in 1969. Happened in New York, right? Which is like the manifestation of LGBTQ people coming forward against the police oppression, right? And that led to a massive riot. And people start speaking and protesting against it. To commemorate this event around the world every year, around the month of June, number of activities taking place. And, people come to streets and they celebrate and they embrace diversity and, in a sometimes more ceremonial, sometimes more, inclusive activities, visibility and everything were part of that. And certain countries celebrate Pride in different months, not necessarily June. So it very much depends on the country and the society that celebrates Pride to adapt when to how to celebrate Pride. So Sri Lanka historically has been celebrating Pride for more than a decade now. Number of activities usually used to take place in Colombo, but since 2019 and 20, Pride events were also organized by groups in Jaffna, right? So for the first time, the annual Pride speech in Tamil was conducted in 2020 by Jaffna Sangam, the LGBTQ group in Jaffna. But they don't necessarily do it in June. Right? Otherwise, usually Pride activities are done in June. Because of the pandemic, most of the activities are also affected by that. Some have actually changed the timetable. Some do activities later months, some do earlier. Yeah, so that's the organization that I am affiliated with. We are supposed to do Pride events end of this month or next month. Because of the COVID, we didn't have much time and energy and resources to devote to visibility events. Instead of that, we have launched a campaign called Pride with a Purpose to help LGBTIQ community affected by the pandemic by providing them immediate relief support, food, shelter, medication, hormones, legal and counseling support. So we've been raising funds to support, and we have been supporting more than 60 people in just 1 month. The Pride with a Purpose campaign, was picked up by many groups and inside and outside of Sri Lanka, and they've been supporting. So we will continue with that for another month or two to help the LGBTQ community affected by the pandemic. So the Pride is being often customized to the local context. So it isn't the celebration of West anymore, right? It's no longer the Western celebration. It's a localized celebration of community that is being historically oppressed because of their gender and sexual orientation based items.
That's perfect. So we're going to end this interview right now. Just
okay. Go ahead.
Is there something else?
No, no,
I
it's fine.
just wanted to ask you one thing. But maybe I can pitch this story about the Pride Month celebration to New York Times, which I also work for. If you can, so what they want is they want something that's published somewhere about this upcoming event, anything. So they would just want to see, is there a link to something that you can send me to say, oh, we're going to do this, this month, end of this month or next month, something like that.
No, I can definitely send.
Or
But
even a
right now,
tweet is also fine.
I mean, we have launched the Pride with a Purpose campaign, and
Mm-hmm.
there's an article published in Sunday morning. I can send you the link,
Yes, please.
and that's in English. And then we'll be launching our number of other events and activities um,
Right.
soon. And so we have already conducted one activities in Jaffna, right?
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
there are other groups that have also done their activities in Jaffna already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can send links for that as well, so then you can choose and project.
Yes, that'll be great, so that I can
So
talk to them and see if I can work on a story. In case
yeah,
mhm. You were
okay.
trying to say?
I told you, no, I will get the contact of
Exactly, you said.
yeah,
So I was thinking maybe daily news for that. And now
yeah.
this seems very interesting for them also. So I can pitch every Friday. I'm pitching stories. So I can pitch
Okay,
this
that's fine.
tomorrow
For the
morning.
next Friday, you want a story?
Yeah, but they
I'll
probably,
get
and also this Jaffna part, localizing this whole thing. So if you have a link to that, a very recent one,
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah. It was
that would
conducted
be
in
super
Tamil,
great.
so they
Uh-huh.
had a panel discussion, a public panel discussion on the queer history and the pride activities in Sri Lanka, particularly in Tamil-speaking communities in the north.
Uh-huh.
So it
When
was
was
like
that done?
it was I think like it was I think late 24th of June.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah.
yeah. I can send you the link for it. Yeah.
Yes, please. So that I can do that. And then we'll definitely do this other story also. Thank you so much.